Tony, why I'm assuming you disagree with much of what we've just heard.
Not surprisingly, yeah, I disagree. I think what troubles me most about Charles's views are the assumptions underneath them, and that is that there are limited numbers of young Americans, Americans in general, who have sufficient ability to master and utilize four-year college education to good effect, either in their private lives, as members of the culture, members of the citizenry, and especially most of what I'll focus on is in their role as workers in the American economy. And the core assumption here, which is hard to ignore because it comes, Charles, in your previous work, is that there is something in each of us that is innate and fixed, doesn't change over time. Charles would begin to choose those of us who were qualified for a BA in the early elementary grades. Doesn't believe that education affects human ability very much. And so the view is that this entity, intelligence, IQ, Spearman's G, known well to both of us, is this particular entity, and that it, in the final analysis, doesn't really move very much, is not subject to educational influences, is fixed, inherited, and has more to do. Charles does not argue that it has exclusively to do with the G in your parents' head, but that it is dominated by that. And so my own bias, and it's not just my own, it's the bias of many others, is that this thing, intelligence, G, IQ, first of all, is simply a number. That is, it is something that we create using statistical methods, largely factor analysis and associated methods. We look at a number of different performances by people and then try to find the unifying performance that summarizes them all best. But I think in the end what is reasonably clear here, and a question that we're not going to settle here today or tomorrow or next year, because we haven't settled it yet over a couple hundred years, and that is, it is true that cognitive ability does affect people's prospects in life. It is also true that people's prospects in life affect their cognitive ability, and a lot of what we're really arguing about here is which is more powerful, nature or nurture. I frankly don't know. I have my biases and Charles has his, but I think it is reasonably clear that whatever that ability is, it is affected powerfully by environmental forces, and that it is more than that. It is something that the environmental forces affect some of us differently than others. That is, if you are a young American whose parents are of few means, lower income, let's say, or somehow or other isolated by your race or other circumstance in your life, if you're a young American of that sort, the less advantaged among us, that when we look at your early test scores when you're very young, an adolescent, we discover when we look at them again when they should have developed further, let's say in your late adolescence and late high school years, what we find, or rather what a man named Turkheimer and a variety of others find, is that there is very little relationship between the two. So to put it simply, what that means is that if you're disadvantaged in America, it looks as if even though you start out fairly smart, you don't develop those abilities. You don't become all you can be. On the other hand, when we look at more affluent kids, what we discover is that the best predictor of their developed ability when they're teens, let's say, is their measured ability when they were very young. And so they tend to fulfill their promise more so than others do, which suggests to many that there are differences here in the effects of environments between different social classes, races, and so on. I agree with Charles that reducing those differences is very, very difficult. That's something we've all learned in the past 30 years or so. A second point, and it's probably more to the practical aspect of what this argument is about, is that I think if you believe, as Charles seems to, that IQ or G or whatever it is we measure on the SAT and ACT really does tell us what people's innate prospects not only are, but always were, no matter what we would have done to try and improve them, at least dramatically. That if you believe that, then since it's also true that the people with high IQs and high test scores and high levels of G tend to be people from affluent and powerful parts of America, from affluent and advantaged families in America, then what you have is, in a sense, a biological proof that social inequality is just, that in the end, biology drives social inequality and not social conditions or culture or economics and so on. Now, those points to me are important. And one closing point, and that is, as a practical matter, I can imagine all sorts of alternative post-secondary education systems. Charles's system is, in most respects, no better or worse than the ones I can make up. I'm just not sure why we want to make up a new one, because the one we have, for all its problems and high costs and so on, seems to have been created in an interaction between the American economy and the American education system. That is, it is a market-driven system.